Here is the thing nobody tells you about Chuck Norris. The jokes say he is the most dangerous man alive, that he can slam a revolving door, that death is afraid of him, that he once kicked a horse in the chin and its descendants are known today as giraffes. The jokes are everywhere. Hundreds of millions of people know them. They have been translated into dozens of languages, repeated in offices and schoolyards and military barracks on every continent on Earth. Chuck Norris became, in the first decade of the 21st century, the most famous joke in human history. But here is what the jokes never mention. The man behind them grew up so poor and so invisible that his own classmates barely knew his name. He was the quiet kid, painfully, cripplingly shy. The boy who never raised his hand, never started a fight, never drew attention to himself because attention felt like something dangerous that happened to other people. He had no athletic ability, no particular talent, no obvious path to anything. His father was an alcoholic who abandoned the family repeatedly and died young. His mother held 3 children together on nothing, moving from town to town across Oklahoma and Kansas and California, never staying long enough for any place to feel like home. There was no reason, not one single visible reason, to believe that this boy would become anything at all. And then, at 18 years old, on the other side of the world in a small Korean town, something happened. The invisible boy found discipline. And discipline, it turns out, can build anything. This is episode 1, before the legend, before the movies, before the memes. This is where Chuck Norris actually began, and it is nothing like what you expect. Ryan, Oklahoma, 1940. The town sits in the southern Oklahoma prairie, flat, dry, the kind of place that the 20th century passed through without stopping. Its population, at the time of Carlos Ray Norris's birth on March 10th, is small enough that everyone knows everyone, and nobody's business is private. The Norris family's business is harder than most. Roy Norris, Chuck's father, is a man whose better qualities, and he has them in the specific way of men whose damage does not cancel their humanity but runs alongside it, are consistently overwhelmed by the alcoholism that defines his relationship to everything he is supposed to be responsible for. He is intermittently present, repeatedly absent, and capable of the particular cruelty that men in the grip of addiction inflict on the people closest to them without fully understanding what they are doing or why. He and Wilma, Chuck's mother, divorce when Chuck is 12. It is not a surprise. It is a relief with a long shadow. Wilma Norris is the fixed point in a family that has very little stability. She is a woman of deep Christian faith and practical resilience, the kind of person who responds to impossible circumstances not with collapse, but with the quiet determination to handle whatever the next hour requires. She works. She holds the household together. She raises 3 boys, Chuck, Wieland, and Aaron, in the specific way that mothers in difficult circumstances sometimes manage, by ensuring that the poverty of the environment does not become the poverty of the character. Chuck absorbs his mother's faith and her discipline more deeply than he absorbs almost anything else about his childhood. He will speak about her throughout his life with the specific reverence of a man who understands that who he became was largely her construction, that the values at the center of everything he built, the refusal to quit, the faith, the commitment to family, were installed in him by a woman who had every reason to despair and chose not to. The family moves constantly. Ryan to Torrance, California, when Chuck is a teenager, the family following the economic migration that takes so many Oklahoma and Texas families west in the post-war years. Torrance is better than Ryan in material terms and no more stable in personal ones. Roy Norris appears and disappears. The family adjusts. The boys grow up in the specific way of children who learn early that the adult world is not reliably organized around their needs, with a self-sufficiency that is genuinely useful and a wariness that costs something. Chuck at school is not the person the legend requires him to have been. He is not the tough kid, not the athlete, not the natural leader who organizes other boys around his confidence and his physical ability. He is the shy one, the boy who sits in the back of the classroom and hopes not to be called on, who navigates the social complexity of American adolescence by making himself as small as possible, who has no particular reason to believe that he is interesting or capable or worth anyone's sustained attention. He is not a fighter. This is worth emphasizing because the legend requires him to have emerged from the womb with a roundhouse kick already perfected. The reality is that Chuck Norris, as a teenager, is someone that a fight would have surprised rather than tested. He has no training, no instinct for violence, no particular physical confidence. He is small and shy and invisible in the way that certain teenagers are invisible, present in the room, absent from anyone's awareness of it. What he has, in the absence of everything else, is his mother's example, the daily practice of showing up, of doing what needs to be done, of not requiring the world to be fair before deciding to engage with it. It is enough. It is, in the end, everything. The Air Force is the first institution that takes Chuck Norris seriously as a person capable of something. He enlists in 1958 at 18 years old, for the same reason that young men from limited backgrounds have always enlisted, because the door is open when others are not, because the military offers structure and direction and purpose to people whose civilian circumstances have provided none of these things reliably. He is assigned as an air policeman, the Air Force equivalent of military police, and stationed first at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas and then at Osan Air Base in South Korea. The assignment to Korea is routine. The consequence of it is anything but. Osan Air Base sits in the Korean countryside south of Seoul, a permanent American military presence in a country that the Korean War established as a front line of the Cold War. The base is a small American world transplanted to a foreign country. The familiar routines of military life conducted against the background of an entirely unfamiliar culture. For a boy from Oklahoma who has never been further from home than California, Korea is the most disorienting and the most clarifying experience of his life. The disorientation is geographic and cultural. The clarification comes from a Korean martial arts school near the base. Tangsudo is a Korean martial art of ancient lineage, a system of striking, kicking, and blocking that has been practiced and refined over centuries, and that carries within its physical practice a philosophical dimension that the Western mind does not immediately associate with combat training. The discipline is not merely physical, it is mental, it is spiritual, in the specific way that traditions which use the body as the instrument of self-cultivation understand the relationship between physical practice and interior development. Chuck Norris walks into the dojang, the martial arts training hall, near Osan in 1958, with no particular intention beyond curiosity. He watches a class. He sees men moving with a precision and an authority that he has never associated with physical practice. He sees the instructor, composed, focused, the embodiment of a quality that Chuck has no word for yet, but recognizes immediately. He asks to join. What happens over the next 3 years is the transformation that makes everything else possible. Not because martial arts makes Chuck Norris physically formidable, though it does gradually through thousands of hours of training, but because it gives him, for the first time in his life, a framework for understanding what the internal qualities his mother installed in him are actually for. The discipline his mother modeled, the showing up, the doing of what needs to be done, the refusal to be defeated by circumstances, maps perfectly onto the discipline of martial arts training. The faith she gave him, the understanding that what a person is inside matters more than what the world offers them from outside, maps onto the philosophical dimension of the practice. The shyness that made him invisible in Torrance, California, is not a problem in the dojang. In the dojang, nobody cares who you were before you walked in. They care only what you do while you are there. He trains every day, before duty, after duty, on weekends, with the focused intensity of someone who has found the thing that organizes everything else. His instructors notice the quality of his attention, the way he processes corrections and applies them, the way he absorbs failure without being diminished by it, the way his body learns the patterns of movement that martial arts requires with a patience and a persistence that is not common in students of any age. The Korean instructors are demanding in the specific way of teachers who understand that real development requires real pressure. They do not soften corrections or manage their students' comfort. They show what is wrong, demonstrate what is correct, and expect the student to close the gap through repetition rather than encouragement. Chuck responds to this environment with something that surprises even himself, not resentment at the demands, but gratitude. The demands mean he is being taken seriously. The corrections mean someone believes improvement is possible. For a boy who spent his childhood being barely noticed, the experience of being genuinely coached, Raui, of having someone invest in what he might become, is something he has never had before and does not take lightly. The other American servicemen on the base have varying relationships with Korea. Some count the days until rotation home. Some explore the country with genuine curiosity. Some keep to the base and its familiar American rhythms. Chuck exists increasingly in the space between the base and the dojang, two worlds, one American and one Korean, with the training hall as the place where the distance between them becomes irrelevant. Inside the dojang, he is simply a student. The rank he holds in the Air Force, the address he grew up at, the specific trajectory of his difficult childhood, none of it applies. What applies is whether his technique is correct and whether his commitment is total. Both, increasingly, are. By the time he earns his black belt in Tang Soo Do and then in other disciplines, the shy boy from Ryan, Oklahoma has become something that Ryan, Oklahoma could not have produced on its own. Not a fighter, exactly, not yet, but a person with a center. A person who knows what he is capable of when he applies the full weight of his discipline to something he believes in. He returns to the United States in 1962 with his discharge papers and the black belt and very little else. No job waiting, no clear path. The civilian world has not been holding its breath for Chuck Norris's return, but he is not invisible anymore. He just has not yet found the stage. The return to California is harder than the Air Force. The military provides structure, purpose, and community that the civilian world does not automatically replace. Chuck Norris is 22 years old, a veteran with a black belt and no applicable civilian credentials, living in a country that is in the middle of the 1960s, the decade of maximum cultural disruption, when everything that seemed fixed about American life is being challenged simultaneously, and the young men who came back from Korea and would soon come back from Vietnam are trying to locate themselves in a world that seems to have changed the rules without informing them. He needs money. He needs direction. The black belt points the way. He begins teaching martial arts, not in a proper school. He cannot afford a proper school. He teaches in his garage, in the back of a parking lot, in whatever space is available to someone whose operating budget is approximately nothing. He charges what his students can pay, which is not much, and he supplements his income with odd jobs while the teaching grows slowly towards something that can support a life. This period, the early 1960s, the garage school years, the building of something from nothing in the specific way that people with no resources build things, is the period that Chuck Norris will later identify as the most formative of his adult life. Not the movies, not Walker, Texas Ranger, not the championships. This, the daily practice of showing up to a garage in Torrance, California, and teaching martial arts to whoever came for whatever they could pay, in the faith that discipline applied consistently would eventually produce something worth having. He meets Diane Holchek during these years. She is a woman of patience and steadiness who sees in the quiet, serious young veteran something that the wider world has not yet recognized. They marry in 1958 before Korea and build their life together in the specific way of young couples who have more ambition than resources, carefully, with attention to what actually matters, without the cushion that money provides. The tournament circuit begins in the mid-1960s as Chuck's skills develop to the point where competition is not just possible, but necessary. necessary in the specific way that people who have developed genuine ability need to test it against the best available opposition in order to understand what they actually have. The early tournaments are humbling. The martial arts tournament circuit of the 1960s is populated by fighters of genuine excellence. Men who have been training since childhood, whose technique is refined to a degree that Chuck's 3 years in Korea and his garage school practice have not yet matched. He loses. He studies what he lost to. He goes back to training. He loses again and studies that. He develops, through this process of loss and analysis and adjustment, the specific competitive intelligence that separates champions from talented people who never quite get there. He does not have the most natural physical gifts on the circuit. He is not the tallest, not the fastest, not the one whose technique is most visually spectacular. What he has is the quality that his mother gave him in Ryan, Oklahoma, and that the Korean dojang refined into something precise: the absolute refusal to be defeated by anything that is within his power to address through work. By the mid-1960s, the losses are becoming rarer. By 1967, they have stopped almost entirely. The Professional Middleweight Karate World Championship in 1967 is not the climax of a dramatic narrative. It is the confirmation of one. Chuck Norris wins it the way he wins everything, through preparation so thorough that the outcome, while never guaranteed, is the logical result of the process that preceded it. He has spent 5 years on the tournament circuit losing and learning and adjusting and improving, building the specific competitive edge that comes from understanding not just how to execute technique, but how to read an opponent, manage the psychology of competition, and perform at maximum capacity in the specific high-pressure context of a championship match. He wins, and then he wins again the following year, and the year after that, 6 consecutive years as world champion. A record that stands not because no one tries to take it from him, but because no one in 6 years of trying succeeds. The championships establish his reputation in the martial arts world completely. He is, by the early 1970s, the most decorated American martial artist of his generation, a fighter whose technical excellence is matched by the specific quality of his competitive record. The students come. The schools open. The garage in Torrance becomes a chain of schools across California. The financial pressure of the early years eases. And then a phone call comes from a man whose name needs no introduction in any martial arts context anywhere in the world. Bruce Lee has been watching Chuck Norris compete. Lee, who is in the process of revolutionizing martial arts cinema with a combination of technical virtuosity and charismatic screen presence that nobody has managed before, sees in Norris something that the tournament record only partially explains. He sees someone who moves with the specific authenticity that film cameras reveal and that trained actors who have not spent their lives in physical practice cannot replicate. He sees someone whose relationship to his own body, its capabilities, its limits, the thousand small adjustments that genuine martial arts mastery produces, is completely honest. He invites Chuck to Los Angeles. They train together. The friendship that develops is genuine and mutual. 2 men who respect each other across the different paths that have brought them to the same place, who find in their shared commitment to martial arts excellence a basis for connection that transcends the considerable differences in their backgrounds and their temperaments. Lee is everything Chuck is not, publicly. Electric, charismatic, the center of every room, a performer to his core. Chuck is everything Lee is not, privately, steady, disciplined, content with the unglamorous work that genuine mastery requires. They learn from each other. Lee sharpens Chuck's awareness of the performance dimension of martial arts. Chuck grounds Lee in the specific technical humility of a man who has spent years losing before winning. La offers him a role, not a large role, a villain in a film that Lee is writing and directing himself to be filmed in Rome. The character will fight Bruce Lee in the Colosseum and lose. It is, on the surface, an unusual offer. Travel to Italy to be defeated on camera by the man who invited you. Chuck accepts. The film is Way of the Dragon. The year is 1972. The fight scene in the Colosseum will become one of the most celebrated sequences in martial arts cinema history. And the invisible boy from Ryan, Oklahoma, the child who grew up in a house with no father, who moved from town to town never belonging anywhere, who sat in the back of classrooms hoping not to be noticed, is about to be seen by the entire world. Episode 2, The Warrior is Born. The championships, the training, and the friendship with Bruce Lee that opened a door, and the devastating loss that forced Chuck Norris to walk through it alone. This is Legends of America.